My neighbor, whom my parents treated like a son, stole my fiancé and convinced her to leave me at the altar. When my parents sided with him, saying love finds a way, I cut contact for 3 years. But when my mom needed emergency surgery, blood type testing revealed that my neighbor is actually my dad's son from an affair, and my parents had been overcompensating out of guilt. I'm 29 years old and work as a construction project manager. Until 3 years ago, I thought I had a pretty normal life. I was engaged to the love of my life, had a good relationship with my parents, and lived in the same neighborhood where I grew up. Everything seemed perfect until the day my entire world collapsed at what was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. My name is Blake. This story involves my former fiancée, Jessica, my parents, David and Carol, and my neighbor, Ryan. Ryan is 26, 2 years younger than me, and he's worked as an electrician since high school. He lived next door to my family home with his single mother, Helen, who worked double shifts as a nurse to support them both. Ryan and I grew up together, but our relationship was complicated from the start. While I was my parents' biological son, Ryan somehow became their emotional favorite. From the time we were kids, my parents treated Ryan like the son they always wanted. They invited him to family dinners, took him on our vacations, bought him clothes and school supplies when his mom couldn't afford them, and celebrated his achievements like they were their own. At first, I didn't mind. I was a generous kid, and I understood that Ryan's family situation was tough. His father had abandoned them when Ryan was 5, and Helen struggled to make ends meet. My parents, David and Carol, stepped in to help. I was proud that we were the kind of family who looked out for our neighbors. But as we got older, the dynamic became more obvious and more painful. When I made the varsity football team in high school, my parents came to a few games. When Ryan made the varsity soccer team, they never missed a match and threw him a celebration party. When I graduated with honors and got accepted to a good college, they congratulated me and moved on. When Ryan graduated and got accepted to trade school, they threw him a massive graduation party and paid for his first semester. My parents always had an explanation. Ryan doesn't have a father figure, they'd say. We're just trying to help Helen out. You understand, don't you, Blake? You have us, but Ryan only has his mom. I did understand, or at least I tried to. I convinced myself that my parents loved me just as much, they just showed it differently. I told myself that their extra attention to Ryan came from a place of kindness, not preference. But deep down, it hurt. It felt like no matter what I accomplished, Ryan would always be more important to them. This pattern continued into our 20s. I started my construction company at 24 and worked incredibly hard to build it up. My parents were proud, they said, but they didn't offer to help financially or promote my business to their friends. When Ryan finished trade school and was looking for work, my dad personally called his contacts to get Ryan hired at the best electrical company in town, even driving him to the interview. When I bought my first house at 26, my parents visited once and complimented the place. When Ryan moved into a new apartment around the same time, my parents helped him move, bought him furniture, and had him over for dinner twice a week to make sure he was eating well. The most painful part was that Ryan never seemed to notice the disparity. He accepted my parents' attention as natural, like he deserved it. He called them Dave and Carol but treated them like substitute parents. He'd show up at their house whenever he wanted, raid their fridge, and talk to them about his problems and relationships. Meanwhile, I felt like I had to make appointments to spend time with my own parents. Everything changed when I met Jessica. She was 25, worked as a graphic designer, and was the most beautiful, intelligent, funny woman I'd ever met. We met at a coffee shop downtown when she accidentally grabbed my order instead of hers. We laughed about it, ended up sharing a table, and talked for 3 hours. I knew immediately that she was special. Jessica and I dated for 2 years before I proposed. It was the happiest period of my life. She understood my complicated family dynamic and was sympathetic about my parents' relationship with Ryan. She'd met him a few times at family gatherings and thought he seemed nice but didn't understand why my parents were so devoted to him. It's sweet that they help him, she'd say, but sometimes it feels like they forget they have their own son. Jessica was the first person who really validated my feelings about the situation. She didn't think I was being petty or jealous, she could see what I'd been experiencing my whole life. When I proposed to Jessica on her 27th birthday, she said yes immediately. We were both over the moon. My parents seemed happy for us, though I noticed they didn't seem as excited as I'd expected. They congratulated us, said Jessica was lovely, and offered to help with the wedding planning. The wedding planning process was stressful in ways I hadn't anticipated. My parents were helpful, but they kept suggesting we include Ryan in the wedding party. He's like family, my mom would say. It would mean so much to him to be part of your special day. I didn't want Ryan in my wedding party. This was supposed to be about Jessica and me, not about my parents' surrogate son. But Jessica, being kind-hearted, eventually suggested we ask Ryan to be a groomsman. It'll make your parents happy, she said, and it's just one day. So, Ryan became a groomsman. He seemed thrilled and immediately started involving himself in all the wedding planning. He had opinions about the venue, the music, the food. He offered to help with electrical work for the reception lighting. He even suggested he could give a speech about watching me grow up next door, which made me want to throw up. But the worst part was how he acted around Jessica. Ryan had always been charming and outgoing, but around Jessica, he turned it up to 11. He complimented her constantly, found excuses to spend time with her during wedding planning, and always seemed to be hovering around when she visited my parents' house. I noticed, but I didn't worry too much about it. Jessica and I were solid. We were in love, engaged, planning our future together. Ryan was just being Ryan, attention-seeking and boundary-pushing like he'd always been. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in June at a beautiful venue outside town. We'd planned everything perfectly, a morning ceremony followed by an afternoon reception. Jessica had found the perfect dress, I'd rented a great tux, and we'd hired a photographer and a band. 200 guests were invited, including all our family and friends. The morning of the wedding, I was getting ready at the venue with my groomsmen. I was nervous but excited, eager to see Jessica and start our married life together. Ryan was there, of course, helping me with my tie and making jokes to calm my nerves. He seemed happy for me, brotherly almost. "You're a lucky guy, Blake," he said as he adjusted my boutonniere. "Jessica's amazing. You better treat her right." "I plan to," I said, not thinking much of the comment. An hour before the ceremony, Jessica still hadn't arrived. Her maid of honor, Sarah, called to say they were running a few minutes late but would be there soon. I wasn't worried. Brides are always a little late, right? 30 minutes before the ceremony, Sarah called again. She sounded upset. "Blake, I need to talk to you. Can you meet me outside?" I went outside to find Sarah crying. "I'm so sorry, Blake," she said. "Jessica isn't coming." My heart stopped. "What do you mean she isn't coming?" "She left," Sarah said through tears. "She said she couldn't go through with it. She said she's in love with someone else." The world tilted around me. "Someone else? Who?" Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear. "Ryan," she whispered. "She's in love with Ryan." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "That's impossible. When did this happen?" "I don't know," Sarah said. "She told me this morning that she's been having feelings for him for months. She said she couldn't marry you when she was in love with someone else." "Blake, I'm so sorry." I stood there in my wedding tux, trying to process what Sarah was telling me. My fiancé had left me at the altar for my neighbor. The man my parents treated like their favorite son had stolen the woman I loved. I had to walk back inside and tell 200 guests that there would be no wedding. I had to face my friends, my family, my coworkers, and explain that my bride had run off with my neighbor. It was the most humiliating moment of my life. My parents' reaction was what broke me completely. When I told them what had happened, I expected shock, outrage, support. Instead, my father put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Blake, I'm sorry this happened, but maybe it's for the best. If Jessica had feelings for Ryan, she wouldn't have been happy in your marriage." My mother nodded in agreement. "These things happen, honey. Love doesn't always go according to plan. At least she was honest before you got married instead of after." "Honest?" I said, incredulous. "She left me at the altar." "I know it hurts," my mom said, "but Ryan is a good man. If Jessica has chosen him, there must be a reason. You'll find someone else. Someone who's meant for you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My parents were defending Ryan and Jessica. They were acting like this was some romantic comedy instead of the destruction of my life. "He's my neighbor," I said. "He was my groomsman. This is a betrayal." "Blake, you're being dramatic," my father said. "Ryan didn't plan this. Sometimes people fall in love. It's no one's fault." But it got worse. Over the next few days, I learned more about what had been happening. Ryan and Jessica had been secretly seeing each other for 3 months before the wedding. They'd been meeting at my parents' house when I was at work. My parents had known about it. They'd known, and they hadn't told me. When I confronted them, they didn't deny it. "We could see that Jessica was conflicted," my mother said. "We thought she'd work through her feelings and choose you. We didn't want to upset you unnecessarily. You knew my fiancé was cheating on me with Ryan, and you didn't tell me." "It wasn't cheating exactly," my father said. "They were just talking, spending time together. We thought it was a phase." "You chose him over me," I said again. "That's not fair, Blake," my mother said. "We love you both. This isn't about choosing sides." But it was about choosing sides, and they'd chosen Ryan, just like they always had. Update. My neighbor, whom my parents treated like a son, stole my fiancé and convinced her to leave me at the altar. When my parents sided with him, saying love finds a way, I cut contact for 3 years. But when my mom needed emergency surgery, blood type testing revealed that my neighbor is actually my dad's son from an affair, and my parents had been overcompensating out of guilt. The final straw came a week after the non-wedding. I went to my parents' house to get some things I'd left there, and I found Ryan and Jessica having dinner with my parents. They looked like a family. My parents were fawning over Jessica, asking about her design work, laughing at Ryan's stories. When they saw me, the conversation stopped. "Blake," my mother said, standing up quickly. "We didn't know you were coming by." "Clearly," I said, staring at the cozy scene in front of me. Ryan had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Blake, man, I wanted to talk to you about everything. I never meant for it to happen this way," he said. "But it did happen," I said. "And now you're here having dinner with my parents like nothing's wrong." "We invited them," my father said. "Ryan and Jessica are going through a difficult time, too. People are judging them for how this happened. They need support." "They need support?" I asked. "What about me? What about your actual son?" "You're always welcome here, Blake," my mother said. "You know that." "Am I? Because it looks like my place at the dinner table has been taken." Jessica finally spoke up. "Blake, I'm sorry about how everything happened. I never wanted to hurt you, but I can't help how I feel about Ryan." "You could have helped it by not pursuing a relationship with him while you were engaged to me," I said. "That's enough," my father said. "This is difficult for everyone. We need to handle it maturely." "Maturely?" I looked around the table at the people who were supposed to love me most. "You want me to be mature about my parents hosting dinner for my ex-fiancé and the man she left me for?" "Blake, you're being unreasonable," my mother said. "Life is complicated. You can't control who people fall in love with." That's when I realized it was hopeless. My parents would always choose Ryan over me. Even when he destroyed my life, they still saw him as the victim who needed their support. I left that night and didn't go back. It's been 8 months since I walked out of my parents' house and cut contact with them. 8 months since I've spoken to Ryan or Jessica. 8 months of trying to rebuild my life after losing everything I thought I could count on. The first few months were the hardest. I had to cancel the honeymoon, return wedding gifts, and deal with all the financial fallout from a canceled wedding. I had to explain to friends and coworkers what had happened and deal with the pity and curiosity that came with being left at the altar. But the hardest part was the loneliness. I'd lost not just my fiancé, but my family and my oldest friend all at once. I felt like I had no one to talk to about what I was going through. My parents tried to reach out a few times in the beginning. My mother called and left voicemails saying she was worried about me and wanted to talk. My father sent texts asking me to come to Sunday dinner, but I didn't respond. I couldn't handle seeing them defend Ryan and Jessica anymore. I threw myself into work instead. My construction company was doing well, and I took on bigger and more challenging projects. Work became my escape, the only place where I felt competent and in control. I also started therapy, which helped me understand the family dynamics I'd grown up with. My therapist helped me see that my parents' treatment of Ryan hadn't been normal or healthy, and that I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt and rejected by it. "It sounds like your parents were overcompensating for something," she said during one session. "People don't usually show that level of favoritism toward a neighbor's child without a reason." I'd wondered about that, too, but I'd never been able to figure out what the reason might be. About 6 months after I cut contact, I heard through mutual friends that Ryan and Jessica had gotten engaged. The news hit me harder than I expected. It felt like final confirmation that they'd moved on completely while I was still struggling to put my life back together. I also heard that my parents were heavily involved in planning their wedding. They were apparently treating it like the wedding they'd always dreamed of, helping with everything from the venue to the catering. It hurt to know that they were putting more effort into Ryan's wedding than they'd ever put into mine. Around the same time, I started dating again. Nothing serious, just casual dates to get back out there. It felt good to remember that there were other women in the world, that Jessica wasn't the only person I could ever love. But every time I brought someone new around, I was reminded of what I'd lost. Not just Jessica, but the support system I'd thought I had. Other people had families they could introduce their dates to. Parents who were excited to meet their children's partners. I had no one. The holidays were especially difficult. I spent Thanksgiving alone and Christmas with friends, but it wasn't the same. I found myself wondering what my parents were doing, whether they were hosting Ryan and Jessica, whether they even missed me. I got my answer when I ran into Helen, Ryan's mother, at the grocery store a few days after Christmas. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, but she couldn't avoid the conversation. "Blake," she said hesitantly. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Helen. How are you?" "I'm okay. Listen, I wanted to say something about everything that happened. I know Ryan and Jessica hurt you badly. I'm sorry about that." "Thank you," I said, surprised by her acknowledgement. "I also wanted you to know that your parents miss you terribly. They talk about you all the time. They're worried about you. They have a funny way of showing it," I said. Helen looked like she wanted to say more, but she just nodded and walked away. The encounter left me feeling confused and angry. If my parents missed me so much, why hadn't they tried harder to fix things? Why had they never acknowledged that Ryan and Jessica had done something wrong? As the 1-year anniversary of my non-wedding approached, I realized I needed to make a decision about my relationship with my parents. I could continue cutting them out forever, or I could try to find a way to have them in my life while maintaining boundaries about Ryan and Jessica. I was leaning towards staying no contact when everything changed again. Nearly 3 years after I cut contact with my family, I got a call that changed everything. It was Helen, Ryan's mother, and she was crying. "Blake, I'm sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who else to call. Your mother had a stroke. She's in the hospital, and it's serious." My heart stopped. Despite everything that had happened, Carol was still my mother. Is she okay? What hospital? Memorial Hospital downtown. Blake, your father asked me to call you. He said he knows you're angry, but he needs you here. I drove to the hospital faster than I should have, my mind racing. I hadn't seen my parents in over 2 years. I didn't know if my mother would even want to see me, or if this was just my father's attempt to force a reconciliation. When I got to the hospital, I found my father in the waiting room. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since I'd last seen him. When he saw me, he broke down crying. Blake, thank God you came. I didn't know if you would. Of course I came, I said. She's my mother. What happened? She collapsed at home this morning. The doctors say she had a massive stroke. They're running tests now to see how much damage there is. We sat together in uncomfortable silence for a while. I wanted to ask about Ryan and Jessica, whether they were coming, but I didn't want to start a fight while my mother was fighting for her life. Blake, my father said after a while, I know we have a lot to talk about. I know you're angry with us, but can we put that aside for now? I need my son. It was the first time in my life I could remember my father specifically needing me, not Ryan. Of course, Dad. We'll figure everything else out later. The doctors came out an hour later to update us. My mother was stable, but she'd need emergency surgery to reduce swelling in her brain. The surgeon explained that they'd need to do blood typing for potential transfusions, and they wanted to test family members to see who might be compatible donors if needed. We'll need blood samples from immediate family members, the doctor said. Parents, siblings, children. My father and I both gave blood samples. As we were finishing up, Ryan and Jessica arrived. I tensed up seeing them, but I was determined not to cause a scene while my mother was in surgery. Blake, Ryan said quietly when he saw me. I'm glad you're here. I nodded but didn't say anything. Jessica hung back, looking uncomfortable. She'd gained weight and looked tired, older than when I'd last seen her. Are you family? The nurse asked Ryan. He's like a son to us, my father said quickly. Can he give blood, too? I'm sorry, but we can only test actual family members for compatibility, the nurse said. Hospital policy. My father looked disappointed, which irritated me even in the midst of the crisis. Even now, he wanted Ryan to be included as family. We waited for hours while my mother was in surgery. Ryan and Jessica eventually left, saying they'd come back the next day. My father and I maintained a vigil, barely speaking, but united in our worry. The surgery was successful, but my mother remained unconscious. The doctor said the next 48 hours would be critical. My father and I took shifts staying with her, and slowly we started talking about things other than her condition. I've missed you, Blake, he said during one of our conversations. The house has been so quiet without you. You had Ryan and Jessica to keep you company, I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. It's not the same, he said quietly. They're not my son. It was the first time he'd ever acknowledged that Ryan wasn't actually his child, that there was a difference between his relationship with Ryan and his relationship with me. On the second day, one of the lab technicians came to speak with us. Mr. Thompson, we've completed the blood work for your family members. There's something unusual we need to discuss with you. My father and I followed him to a private office. The technician looked uncomfortable as he pulled out several charts. Sir, when we do compatibility testing, we also check for family relationships to ensure accuracy. According to our tests, you and your son Blake are definitely father and son, but there's something else. He paused, looking between us. We also tested the young man who came in yesterday, Ryan Mitchell. He insisted he was family, so we ran his blood work, too, even though we told him we could only use immediate family members. My heart started pounding. I had a terrible feeling about where this was going. Mr. Thompson, according to the blood work, Ryan Mitchell is also your biological son. The room went silent. My father went white as a sheet. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. That's impossible, my father said weakly. Final update. My neighbor, whom my parents treated like a son, stole my fiancé and convinced her to leave me at the altar. When my parents sided with him, saying love finds a way, I cut contact for 3 years. But when my mom needed emergency surgery, blood type testing revealed that my neighbor is actually my dad's son from an affair, and my parents had been overcompensating out of guilt. I'm sorry, sir, but the tests are conclusive. Ryan Mitchell is definitely your biological child. Based on his age, I'd estimate the conception occurred approximately 26 years ago. I did the math quickly. 26 years ago, my father had been married to my mother for 5 years. I was 3 years old. Helen, Ryan's mother, would have been working as a nurse, probably stressed and struggling as a single mother after Ryan's supposed father left. Except Ryan's father hadn't left. He'd been living next door the entire time. My father started crying. Not the quiet tears he'd shed when my mother was in surgery, but deep, racking sobs. Blake, he said through his tears, I can explain. Can you? I asked, my voice hollow. Can you explain why you've been lying to me my entire life? Can you explain why you had an affair with our neighbor and then spent the next 26 years pretending her son was just some kid you were helping out of kindness? It wasn't supposed to happen, he said. Helen was going through a difficult time. Her husband had just left her. She was pregnant and scared. I was trying to help, and one thing led to another. So you cheated on Mom? Yes, he admitted. I cheated on your mother. It only happened a few times. But Helen got pregnant, and you just let her raise Ryan alone? Let him think his father had abandoned him? Helen didn't want me to leave your mother. She said she could handle it on her own. But I couldn't just abandon my son, so I found ways to help. I convinced your mother that we should be good neighbors. Help Helen out. Mom knew? My father was quiet for a long moment. Your mother figured it out when Ryan was about 5. She could see the resemblance. We had a terrible fight. Almost got divorced, but she agreed to stay together for your sake. So, she knew Ryan was your son this whole time? Yes. And she felt guilty about it. She felt like she denied Ryan a father, so she tried to make up for it by treating him like her own child. Everything clicked into place. The favoritism, the special treatment, the way my parents always defended Ryan no matter what he did. They weren't just helping a neighbor kid. They were raising their secret son while lying to both of us about it. You let me grow up feeling like I wasn't good enough, I said. You let me think Ryan was just naturally more lovable, more deserving of your attention. Blake, that's not how we saw it. That's exactly how you saw it. I stood up, rage flooding through me. You felt guilty about your affair, so you overcompensated by giving Ryan everything while making me feel like I had to earn your love. We love you, Blake. We've always loved you. You have a terrible way of showing it. The lab technician had quietly left during our conversation. I was alone with my father and the truth that had been hidden from me for my entire life. Does Ryan know? I asked. No, my father said. We never told him. Helen never told him. He still thinks his father abandoned them. So, he stole my fiancé without even knowing he was stealing her from his brother. My father flinched. Blake, you have to understand. We were trying to protect everyone. You were protecting yourselves, I said. You were too cowardly to deal with the consequences of your affair, so you made everyone else pay for it instead. I left the hospital that day feeling like my entire life had been a lie. Not only had my parents betrayed me by siding with Ryan and Jessica, but they'd been lying to me about who Ryan really was for my entire life. Their favoritism wasn't just unfair. It was based on a secret that had shaped every family interaction I'd ever had. The revelation about Ryan being my half-brother sent shockwaves through what was left of our family, but not in the way I expected. When my mother woke up 3 days later, my father told her that the secret was out. Her first concern wasn't about her health or the stroke. It was about how this would affect Ryan and Jessica. We have to tell them, she said weakly from her hospital bed. Ryan deserves to know the truth. Do I deserve the truth? I asked her, because I've been living a lie for 29 years. My mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. Blake, honey, we never meant to hurt you. We thought we were doing the right thing. The right thing would have been honesty, I said. The right thing would have been treating your actual son with the same love you showed your secret son. We do love you, she insisted. We've always loved you. You love Ryan more, I said. You always have. Now I know why, but it doesn't make it hurt less. My father decided to tell Ryan and Helen the truth that evening. He asked me to be there, but I refused. I couldn't handle watching Ryan process the news that my father was his biological father. I couldn't handle seeing him realize that he'd been chosen over me his entire life, even by the man who was secretly his dad. According to my father, the conversation didn't go well. Helen was furious that he'd revealed the secret after all these years. She accused him of being selfish and said he should have taken the truth to his grave. Ryan was shocked and confused. He'd spent his entire life believing his father had abandoned him, and now he was learning that his father had been next door the whole time. But the worst part was that Ryan was angry, not at my father for lying to him, but at Helen for keeping the secret. He felt like he'd been robbed of a relationship with his real father. He was upset that he'd grown up thinking he was fatherless when David had been there all along. Jessica was apparently supportive of Ryan through all of this, which somehow made everything worse. Not only had she left me for him, but now she was standing by him as he processed the news that he was my brother. It felt like another betrayal, even though logically I knew she was just being a good partner to him. The family dynamics became even more twisted after the revelation. Ryan started spending even more time with my parents, now openly calling my father Dad and my mother Carol as he always had, but with new meaning. He wanted to make up for lost time, to have the father-son relationship he'd always craved. My parents were thrilled. They no longer had to hide their favoritism or pretend that Ryan was just a neighbor they were helping. They could openly treat him like their son because he was their son. Meanwhile, I felt more alone than ever. I thought things couldn't get worse than my parents siding with Ryan when he stole my fiancé. But now they were openly celebrating their reunion with their secret son while barely acknowledging how much they'd hurt their known son. A month after my mother's stroke, Ryan and Jessica announced that they were having a baby. My parents were over the moon. They were going to be grandparents, and their first grandchild would be Ryan's child, the son they'd always favored. I heard about the pregnancy through Helen, who called me unexpectedly one evening. Blake, I wanted you to hear this from me, not through the grapevine, she said. Ryan and Jessica are expecting a baby. Congratulations to them, I said flatly. I also wanted to apologize, Helen continued. I know this whole situation has been terrible for you. I never wanted any of this to come out. Why didn't you ever tell Ryan the truth? I asked her. Because I was ashamed, she admitted. I was ashamed that I'd had an affair with a married man. Ashamed that I'd broken up a family. David was a good neighbor and a good man, but what we did was wrong. So, you let Ryan grow up thinking his father abandoned him? I thought it was better than him knowing his father chose another family over him, Helen said. I was trying to protect him. You were protecting yourself, too? I said. Yes, she admitted. I was protecting myself, too. Helen's honesty was refreshing compared to my parents' continued justifications for their behavior. At least she could admit that her choices had been selfish as well as protective, but the conversation also made me realize how deep the deception had gone. Helen, my parents, and even some of my extended family members had been complicit in hiding the truth. I've been the only one who didn't know that Ryan was my brother. The baby announcement was the final straw for me. I realized that my parents would now have a grandchild to dote on, and that grandchild would be the child of the son they'd always preferred and the woman who'd left me at the altar. It was like a twisted fairy tale where the villain gets the happy ending. I decided to move away. I'd been thinking about expanding my construction business to another city anyway, and this seemed like the perfect time to make a fresh start. I found a great opportunity in a city about 3 hours away, big enough to get lost in, but close enough that I could still run my existing projects. Before I left, I wrote my parents a letter explaining my decision. I told them that I couldn't be part of a family that had been built on lies and favoritism. I said that I hoped they'd be happy with Ryan and their future grandchild, but that I needed to build a life away from all of them. I also wrote a letter to Ryan. I told him that I didn't blame him for our parents' choices, but that I couldn't have a relationship with him either. He'd unknowingly been the beneficiary of lies and deception that had shaped my entire childhood, and I couldn't separate him from that pain. I didn't write anything to Jessica. There was nothing left to say to her. I moved away 6 months ago, and it's been the best decision I've made in years. I have a new house, new friends, new clients, and a new girlfriend named Sarah, who has nothing to do with my old life. I'm building something that's entirely mine with no hidden agendas or secret family members. My parents have tried to contact me a few times, usually around holidays or major events. They sent me pictures when Ryan and Jessica's baby was born, a little girl they named Emma. She's beautiful and she looks like Ryan, which means she looks like my father. I felt nothing when I saw the photos. No anger, no sadness, no longing to be part of her life. She's my niece technically, but she's also the child of my former fiancé and the brother I didn't know I had. She represents everything I've left behind. Sometimes people ask me if I regret cutting off my family. They say blood is thicker than water, that family is everything, that I should forgive and move on. But those people don't understand what it's like to discover that your entire childhood was built on a lie, that the favoritism you sensed was real and based on a secret affair. I don't regret my choice. I'm happier now than I've been in years. I'm building a life based on honesty and mutual respect, surrounded by people who chose to be in my life and who value me for who I am, not out of guilt or obligation. Ryan and Jessica are having their happily ever after with my parents' blessing and support. The baby will grow up surrounded by grandparents who adore her and parents who fought for their love. That's the family they chose, and they're welcome to it. As for me, I'm creating my own family now, one based on choice, honesty, and genuine affection. It may not be the family I was born into, but it's the family I deserve. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your own mental health is to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're related to you. Blood may be thicker than water, but respect and honesty are thicker than blood. And I've finally found both in my new life, far away from the lies and favoritism that define my old one. The truth really did set me free, free from a family that never truly valued me, free from a neighborhood full of secrets, and free to build the life I actually want rather than the one I was born into. And that's worth more than any relationship built on deception.